we saw last year human rights breakthrough in a way that we probably, haven't seen in recent memory,
Right.
other than iconic moments like 1968 Mexico, right? But you saw the context of Qatar breakthrough. Now we're in, August of 2023. We're here in Australia, New Zealand. As a result of the event coming here and being here, are you seeing any human rights issues breaking through here?
So there was a thorough analysis done prior to by the Australian Human Rights Commission, and it identified some of the key deficits that we have that needed to be considered. Now, freedom of speech was one, and the right to protest within Australia at state, federal and government level is under threat. We haven't seen, so far in this World Cup, any kind of protest movements or people trying to wear particular things into the games, which we did see in Qatar, and they were largely curtailed, and that created a really important global conversation. So there were some areas that might have become a bit of a flashpoint that we haven't seen simply because that activism hasn't been there. Gender equality has been key. So I would say generally that people in Australia, in the sporting community, are aware that human rights are a factor in this World Cup. I was hoping that people would come in the same way that we as Australians were perfectly prepared to hold Qatar accountable, right? I was hoping that the world will come here and hold us accountable, right? And because, that's important. So that's why I've been speaking.
Because every country has human rights challenges.
We all have different challenges. And
right.
First Nations rights is one of our key ones. And so I was hoping that all the athletes would come here and say, well, listen, you guys done a really bad job on that. And what does that mean in terms of football? That would have been a really great conversation. So gender equality has been an important one, and that's because the athletes in Australia have fought for their own equal pay in the same way that United States and others.
Very powerful video from the Matildas.
Very, and authentic,
right.
like talking about actual rights.
Right.
And that's because they've had the opportunity to be educated by their Players Association. They've brought experts in, as the Socceroos did. They met with not just the Supreme Committee, our actual Socceroos, they met with migrant worker groups, and, they did their homework. And that needs a lot of resources, a lot of time, and I think is a model that, we're hoping all players will go through around the world, prior to any World Cup, to understand
right.
what's happening on the ground, what are we going to be asked, what do we feel strongly about, how can we respond to that, what should we say, but everything that should be said must be within a human rights framework.
Right.
And we're not seeing that from athletes yet, predominantly. Yeah. So the final part that I think is a big issue here is safe sport and sexual abuse, forms of abuse and harassment of female players in Australia.
Now, there's a recent survey that was done, right, or an audit.
Yeah. So we had one of our legendary national team players by the name of Lisa Devanna, might be 2 years ago now or so, who came out and talked about harassment and abuse that she had suffered as a young player in our national team environment. So that's extremely serious. The game has not dealt with that adequately, and so that issue, is still, in my view, very much alive. And what happened was there was an inquiry put together with a very narrow, finite terms of reference, and for example, they had something like 29, 30 people who submitted grievances to that, historical grievances, and I think only 4 came within the terms of reference. And then the other 25 were told, look, sorry, you don't fall. But the game didn't then say, well, hang on a minute, these are people who've had issues in the game. These are women who have had issues, and we need to better understand that, right?
Well, so when you talk about athlete harassment and abuse, recently the Players Association, I believe, did a survey, and they found, because anytime you host an event, there's going to hopefully be a swell of interest by children in participating. So there was a survey done, and it found something like 1 in 4. Is that right?
28%.
Tell me more. 28%.
28% of players surveyed, so current female players, are professional and international, have experienced all forms of abuse and harassment as throughout their career, and particularly in their kind of teenage years and so on. And so it is a significant issue for the game globally, and it is here. The Players Association weren't able to get any real support from the governing body in Australia, and so I did their own research, released that research, and the issue with that is that we haven't seen a response from the game. And what we see is data saying that around another 400,000 girls will be inspired to play football because of the incredible work of our national team here.
So using those numbers, that means that 100,000 or more could potentially be at risk.
They are at risk.
They are at risk.
And so
without an intervention.
That's right. Yeah. So the Players Association are trying to encourage, a response to that, and we'll see whether that occurs. But that is a huge concern coming out of this World Cup.
Absolutely. Craig Foster, always great to sit down and talk with you.
Good to see you.